Given a 10-pound note which must be had, query where to get it. A problem not over easy of solution for a man who has exhausted the generosity of those few friends who are generous, and discovered the hollowness of those numerous acquaintances who, not ill-natured in the beaten way of friendship, will do anything for a friend except open their purse strings. A sharp December morning. The wind has changed in the night from southwest to due east, and there has been a light fall of snow, which is whitening the various and picturesque roofs of Chelsea and hangs on the ragged elm branches on Cheyenne Walk. The river is dun color, the sky iron gray, as if the atmosphere were heavily charged with snow. Butchers' boys, cabmen, and those denizens of the street who seem to get through their daily round of labor with an ample margin of leisure for gossip and standing about at corners, look up at the darkened vaults of heaven and opine that there will be a heavy fall of snow before night. This is the cold world which Alexis Secretan faces, leaving his wife asleep in the old tent bed at number 11 Dixon Street. She has fallen into slothful habits of late, pleading as her excuse that there is so little to get up for nowadays. Certainly not pleasure or prosperity, not even so much as a new book to read. So does not that ragged old Don Juan, whose bitterest verses Alexis gloats over in his gloomiest moods, constitute with graceless Tom Jones the entire stock of literature in Sybil Secretan's reach. 10 pounds. He faces the bitter blast blowing up the river from Plumstead and Woolwich and all the chilly eastern marshes, and seeming to concentrate its biting power upon innocent Cheyenne Walk. He faces the rasping wind moodily, puzzling out this insolvable problem: where to get 10 pounds? Where to get it? That is the only question. The how to get it has been settled from the beginning. He must borrow it. He has almost reached the lower depth of the hardy and habitual borrower. He has but to settle with himself upon whom he shall make his demand. For himself he might perchance never have stooped to borrow. He would have emigrated rather, and lived by the sweat of his brow in some new country where men are equal and poverty less than a crime. Or, his heart failing him, he might have flung himself and his difficulties off Waterloo Bridge, and so made an easy end of them. But with a young and beloved wife dependent on him for daily bread, he has sacrificed pride and independence, manhood and honesty even. He sometimes thinks, and for the last 6 months has lived, a wretched hand-to-mouth existence, trying to get employment all the time, and occasionally earning a fortuitous 5-pound note, but supporting the burden of life for the most part by the aid of loans obtained from the associates of happier days. He is not a man upon whom so pitiful a position sits lightly, though, being gifted by nature with a peculiarly sweet and easy temper, he has a way of taking his troubles placidly, especially in the presence of his wife, and his railings at fate and fortune, though frequent, are philosophical rather than angry or vindictive. He is a man who, if nature's bounties are to be counted as a heritage, is not undowered, eminently handsome, of a noble presence, athletic, with a constitution to which illness and disease are unknown, with a voice that can soothe or charm, threaten or command, an eye that dominates man and the lesser animals alike, a quick, bright intellect, a wondrous power of endurance, that noble quality which in a horse would call stay, which in a man is perhaps the crowning characteristic of manhood. With such gifts as these, Alexis Secretan could hardly count himself ill-furnished for the battle of life. Unhappily, the old fairy story of the princess's christening gifts repeats itself more or less in every man's life. Among the numerous good fairies who were invisible guests at Alexis Secretan's baptismal feast, 2 evil fairies slipped in unawares. Those were poverty and unthrift. "I shall have little of this world's goods," said the first. "And he shall squander that little," added the second. This baptismal curse has been fulfilled. The only son of a disinherited father, Alexis has yet escaped the chastening influence of that sharp schoolmaster, poverty. His mother's fortune was enough to support father and son in luxurious idleness, and in a happy-go-lucky, easy kind of life in foreign cities where life is cheaper, gayer, and brighter than at home. At 17, his father's influence was sufficient to obtain him a commission in a crack regiment. Father and mother died within a year of each other, and soon after, Alexis had put on his epaulets the remnant of his mother's fortune, the bulk thereof having been anticipated and made away with for year after year as necessity impelled, served to keep the young man going in an expensive profession for about 5 years, during which he had the good fortune to see some active service, distinguish himself by various displays of reckless daring, and obtain a captaincy. At the end of the 5th year, he had spent the last shilling of his capital and was in debt. Knowing the impossibility of living on his pay, he sold out, and for some time, about a year and a half, contrived to live upon the proceeds of his commission, having thus sacrificed his military career to the necessities of 18 months' idleness, and to that miserable condition of a noble profession which makes it impossible that a gentleman should live by his sword. Alexis reviews the ranks of his acquaintances as he walks Londonwards. He has exhausted the bounty of his easy-going and, in some cases, open-handed brother officers. No hope of help there. His foreign education has left him without school friends near at hand. Honest Max or jovial Fritz of Heidelberg might advance him a thaler or a handful of Gaussian were they within reach, but their normal state is impecuniosity. There is but one source left undrained. Even in this depth of destitution, he has not yet appealed to his mother's sole surviving sister, his Aunt Louisa, co-heiress with his mother of a rich Manchester manufacturer, and more fortunately married than his mother. Aunt Louisa is the wife of Dudley Gorsuch, barrister, in large practice, and member of Glassford in the Potteries, a self-made man, self-important, and worshipping rank and mammon as the Ammonites worshipped Moloch. On this bleak December morning, it occurs to Alexis that Aunt Louisa, being of his mother's kin, must have some green spot in her nature, some place in her heart accessible to softer feeling, were it but the size of a pin's point, and that he, her nephew, destitute and forlorn, ought to be able to find that place. He has dined at her house when he was a dashing young officer, well dressed, well surrounded, has been entertained bounteously by her, made much of, presented to her friends with some touch of pride, being verily a young man for women to be proud of in his prosperous days. At that happier time, Aunt Louisa appeared to him worldly, but good-natured, hospitable, benevolent even. He is at the bottom of Grosvenor Place by this time, and has made up his mind to try Aunt Louisa. Mr. and Miss Gorsuch live in a street out of Grosvenor Place, too expensive a street for Mr. Gorsuch.